And I remember seeing video, and I wanted to see the reaction of the people as they walked into these Disney folks. They walked into the room, and now they're in the business of imagination. And when you see their faces light up like children, when you see that gasp, you're like, I've got them. And I knew that from that moment, we had them in this space where we could tell powerful stories, and we came this close to
we almost took that business
down to that because they were.
I think Coca-Cola ended up having to lower their price in order but we came very, very close to taking that business. So, I think the lesson in that was, I think from a design standpoint, always challenge the brief.
Hello, everybody coming in. We'll just give it a couple of, a few seconds just to allow everybody to, we can see people drifting in. We're very pleased. 150 registered for this. Obviously, we would love to get, as many people on that registration as possible. And we tend to find that people sort of like come in, whether it's 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late, the reality of everybody's day. We take calls, we have to do this instead of that. So we're just excited that you guys have found the time and would join us today. When I first put on my camera, I thought I was seeing double, literally. So, it's not me being blurry-eyed in the morning, but it was just this notion that normally it's one person, but this is two great people, great friends of the industry. And part of this KnownUnknown, project is to make those friends, whether we are, just entering the industry, maybe through education, or we've been in the industry forever, like me, it seems, and we're still making new friends and great friends. So thanks again to everybody jumping in. We're very honored that you join us. If you get a chance before I sort of open up the mic and speak to our two guests, just say hi, let us know where you're effectively dialing in from. We always love to know which corner of the world people are joining us from. And I think it'll be great for Teman and Teran to also understand, where their new friends are. So let's get going. I want to say hello to two guys that I really admire. And I'm going to let them do a brief introduction. What this is not going to be today is a portfolio presentation. We can do that on another day with someone else, but we just thought this would be a great opportunity to see this more of a conversation, see where the flow goes, get inside the hearts and minds of two great leaders who've experienced so much. And maybe we can take away a couple of nuggets that help us all through some of the sort of advice and the words that they share. So I'm going to ask them both to say a little bit about themselves, not a major introduction, but in their own words, rather than me speak to their great education, their great brand side. They've been on agency side. They're still in education. And I think that's such a contribution to the industry. So I'm always conscious, where do I start? No, let me ask, who's technically the oldest?
4 minutes older here.
Okay, great. Because we have twins in our family, and that's always a question. Great. So let's go youth before age with an introduction.
All right, so I'm more than happy to start. So I'm very thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation, James. I'm Teran Evans. I will start professionally. I'm currently the Vice President of Brand Strategy and Affinity Partnerships at BECU. For those who may not know what BECU is, it's the fourth largest credit union in the United States. It is the first time that I've found myself in the financial services space. My career has spanned probably every single industry imaginable, and if not every single one imaginable, a lot of them. And we'll talk a bit about that during our time. But I am based in Seattle, Washington. I've been on the West Coast for about 5.5 years now. Before that, spent all of my career on the East Coast of the United States, mainly in New York, and spent some time in Boston. I'm here in Seattle. I live with my partner, Rafael. We enjoy getting out and seeing and hiking and birding and doing all the things that people in the Pacific Northwest love to do in their free time. And I'll hand it over to Mana now.
Yeah, great handoff.
Hi everyone, Teman Evans here, 4 minutes older, and I lead design at General Mills, but I come to General Mills by way of PepsiCo, where Toronto and I overlapped. And I don't want to reveal too much of the narrative ahead of time, so we'll dig more into that lately. But I would say that I ended up in this chair through an improbable path of curiosity and maybe a little bit of passion and some dumb luck. But there are some threads that have moved through, I think, every single bit of that journey. Troy and I will talk about that in more detail. But I've been here in the Twin Cities for a little over 7 years. I moved here from New York City. So I'm still adjusting to the weather. I think that's partly because we are Floridians. He grew up in much warmer climates. And honestly, it's been a strange journey of, being the steward of some of the world's biggest and most impactful and loved brands. And I think that is a charge that you have to take with a lot of honestly, with sensitivity and with a lot of care. And it's something I think a skill set Tron and I've cultivated over time. We also are educators. That's very important to us. We always tell our students we think we learn more from them than they learn from us. But it's very important to continue to forge that community of designers. We're only as powerful as that community. So I'm excited to see so many familiar names in the list of attendees today.
Awesome. Thank you guys for that introduction. And speaking of lists, in our guest list, feel free anyone to drop a question into the chat. We have a little back channel. I can read those questions out and direct it to both or one or the other. Coming back to maybe an opening question for creatives on the call to give maybe some advice from your perspective, because we'll go back to the education. We'll go back to maybe some of the roots and when you were younger in Florida. I just picked up. Do you think it's a great track or pathway for any designer, any creative, at some point in their career to work on the brand side? Maybe they're in an agency right now. Maybe they're freelance. Maybe they're just about to leave school. Do you think that's an important kind of skill set in many ways to understand how the brands work? Brands are all different, so there's no one great answer out there. But I'd just love to kind of get both of your perspectives on that particular thought for anybody who's thinking about that at the moment.
I love that question. Teran, did you want to start?
No, feel free to.
I think partly because if I go back in the timeline to my agency days, I was the VP of Design and Strategy at FCB New York. And of course, that means you're constantly pitching and you're getting to know your clients and you're helping them grow their brands. And I remember when I made the choice to shift over to brand side. Part of it, I think, is because I was exhausted of pitching because, you're singing for your supper every week. But there was also something else, another dynamic that I felt that I needed to be exposed to that I wasn't, despite everything that I was learning on the agency side. And so when I shifted over to PepsiCo and overlap with Teran, that was an eye-opening experience. And I say that, and I've recommended to so many designers because there's suddenly something different that you're responsible for. Part of it, whenever you're working within those large client-based organizations, they'll ask if you are familiar with a matrix environment. And that just means you know a lot of brands, which is something from the agency side. You're touching different brands all the time. But there's also a different way of communicating. The stakeholders suddenly become different. And your success is hinged on your ability to be a translator in those rooms. And I found that I needed to suddenly show up and be able to speak a language of finance and growth in a way that I hadn't in the agency world. We would get a client who was responsible for getting the project to delivery, and then we move to our next client. When you're on the client side, that work doesn't stop at launch. You have to actually be responsible for, did this thing actually move the needle? Did it grow? Did it not just get share of eyes and attention, but did it convert that attention to actual acquisition? Did someone decide to buy something, to purchase something? Did you increase share? Did you increase household penetration? And so it was eye-opening for me because I suddenly had to become facile in a language that maybe I was a little less comfortable with. And it has been a game changer in the development of my career. And it's why I recommend it to so many designers. You need to honestly be able to live in both of those worlds. The agency world teaches you so much in terms of the ability to build, the ability to be able to be a fantastic storyteller. But then you learn on the client side how to operationalize that. And you need both of those skill sets, honestly, to be, I think, a more powerful designer in the long run. Tron, would you add to that?
Yeah, I think it's well said, Tim. I think the way I would characterize it is that my experience on the agency side of things gave me breadth. I touched a lot of brands. I worked across a number of different industries. My experience on the brand side gave me depth. And so you start to drill down really deeply into those complex brand questions when you're on the brand side, understanding who that customer is, understanding the way that business works, understanding all the mechanics that take that product from an idea to the shelf. And so I think it's really important to have a well-rounded view in terms of having, on the agency side, worked on a number of different brands, but then on the brand side, understanding all of the complexities that brands have to contend with when they're bringing products to market.
I love that idea of going from a mile wide and an inch deep to an inch wide and a mile deep when you go on the brand side. And then maybe actually back out again, right? Because it's not, none of these are a one and done. They're all sort of part of everybody's journey to kind of like, kind of grow mentally and as we take our own pathway. One thing I found really fascinating, thanks guys for inviting me to help co-judge with some of the great judges your series at Harvard. Not only did you study there, but you had this fantastic program that I thought we were just going to be judging quote unquote graphic design. But what was really phenomenal about the way you'd led the students, and I think there were 4 or 5 brands, if I remember rightly, that were iconic, maybe part of our memory, but maybe I remember one, Popsicle. And you really sort of like, it wasn't just a repackaging of an iconic kind of story and a great brand. It was this kind of end-to-end strategic proposition, make a business case for relaunching it, where and how. And so that kind of business mindset, as well as great branding and great packaging and great identity. Tell us a little bit more around that. Was that something you brought, or is just something that has developed over time, both with Harvard and then maybe outside of that format as well?
I think honestly, all roads lead to Harvard in terms of that story, because it actually started when we were students. And when Teran and I were tiny designers, baby designers, we thought that we'd walk into Harvard and we'd leave building these big buildings in incredible cities. And somehow we ended up being exposed to the architect, well, really the Starchitect, Rem Koolhaas. And we got to intern in his office. And suddenly we found that we weren't just working on buildings. We were, of course, contributing to the work happening at the time on CCTV channel, Chinese Central Television. But he also had a side of his company called AMO, which they call the theoretical side, but it was really more of the brand side. And that was the side of the company that was creating strategic innovation for the Beijing Olympics. And it was working on the runway shows for companies like Prada. And we were suddenly exposed to this other world. We realized they were stretched in the degree that we were going after. And Rem came to Harvard and gave a lecture one evening, and he invited all of us out to dinner afterwards. And he said something that became the polemical spark for everything we think that we've done since. He sat at the dinner table. I remember I was sitting next to Sarah Whiting, who's now the dean of Harvard's design school. And he said, it's so strange to me that you all are exposed to this incredible education of architecture that teaches you so many unique skills and ways of working, so many powerful ways of moving the world forward. And yet when you graduate, you all kill each other to do the exact same thing, build buildings. I don't understand that. And I remember it landed on me like thunder. And I think it did. Teran and I, we walked home from that dinner afterwards to our apartment in Sommerville. And we were very quiet in the walk, but we spent the entire evening up after that talking. We were not the same after that insight from REM. And what it taught us was that honestly, this skill set could be put into so many different industries, that we had received this education, not just in building buildings, but in three-dimensional problem solving. And you could think about that at the scale of cities and buildings. We could also think about that in terms of products that fit in the palm of your hand, or brands that don't have an actual, sort of physical manifestation, but live in the psychographics of consumers. And once we were bitten by that sort of that moment, we were left changed, and it honestly became the spark for everything that we did afterwards.
I think one of the many things we say to our students is that we see a design degree or an architecture degree as the law degree of the 21st century. And so what we mean by that is, as you've seen with a law degree, where it can open you up to being the CEO of a corporation, or it can make you president of the United States and everything in between. It sets you up to sort of, I think, to be a leader in a number of different industries. We think the same is true of a design degree. It's education and strategy and three-dimensional problem solving, as Teman said, and it can be applied, at the scale of buildings or products, but it can also be applied in politics, in fashion, and in every other sort of capacity. And so for us, it really was an opportunity to go in and at the point when students are still at that critical point where they're deciding what they're going to do with themselves professionally when they leave school, and start to, I think, maybe suggest that there are other paths to Rome, so to speak, getting them at that really important juncture where they haven't quite decided where they're going to go. And so many of our students have gone on to build their own brands. They've gone on to join large tech companies like Google and Apple. Some of them have gone into the space of politics. For us, it's just, we call it's our diabolical plot to take over the world. But it's really about arming designers and to be change makers at every single level and in every single industry.
Do you think, therefore, and I know we're all sort of interested in how the educational, across the board actually, but certainly from a creative perspective, will change with everything that's going on around us technology-wise, and we'll come on to that. But do you think that the future of a designer who's studying today, right now, maybe that she's 20 years old, she's just getting that's potentially therefore a CEO of the future in a large organization, not just kind of the head of the design department, which is probably where my aspirations would have been when I was a student. That now what you're saying is it's potentially a much broader series of options, maybe even more senior across an organization than just purely siloed in design.
Yeah, we're already seeing it. I mean, we're seeing it playing out. We're seeing organizations in some instances walk away from the title of chief design officer, starting to walk away from the title of even chief marketing officer, and looking at people who sort of can have all of those skills all up and giving them new titles and also moving them all the way up to the title of CEO. So we aren't going to be, I think, kind of pigeonholed in the space of design and with that title of designer. We're going to have to bring that skill along with other skills around commerce to the table to be the Swiss Army knife of valuable skill sets for organizations. So I think we're already starting to see it play out. We're seeing instances where Gap just hired their first chief entertainment officer. There's something new happening in the industry now where we understand the importance of design and culture, but also the importance of commerce as well.
And I would even honestly step that up maybe a notch and say beyond just being CEO, I imagine a designer being the head of NATO. I imagine designers leading the UN. I imagine designers sitting in the Senate, in the White House. Because you think about the trajectory of problems that need to be solved, this complex nexus of finance, but also of environment and sustainability. It requires the ability to zoom in to very minute detail and then zoom out and appreciate the large picture. that is an education in design. So I think designers are uniquely suited to step into these spaces and start to be disruptors, but also change agents in a way that we haven't been in the past.
I mean, that's incredible to think. And if there's any young, kind of students on this call, or even seasoned, this idea that our industry is going to morph and change and actually be a driver of all industries, irrespective. Let me go back to when you were kids. I think I picked up you were growing up in Florida. So, nice sunny part of the world. Was that sort of creativity always there? Obviously, you guys have always been together probably at every point and then there's this converge, diverge. But when you were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, if you can remember those earlier days, were you highly creative, or did you sort of just start to pick that up in your later young adult kind of era?
We always were, right, Teran? But we did not recognize it as a career trajectory. For us, it was just an outlet for fun. So early on, from early days, our bedroom, we converted into a city. The city didn't have a name. We just called it the city. And it had a parliament, and it had villages, and we would stage storytelling there. There would be political coups, and there would be annexation issues. And we learned early that sort of the city and that context was this sort of interesting playground for storytelling. And then beyond that, we would build our own cities, and we would draw them, and we would tell stories throughout them. We would do the same thing with floor plans for buildings. We just sit there, we hang over them together, and we literally be telling a story to ourselves. I'm over in this space, you're over there. And so we were understanding the idea of space and narrative, but it was a creative outlet. So when we honestly were about to go into college, I thought I was going to have to go in undecided, because I remember sitting at dinner and telling our parents, I don't know what I want to do. And it took our mom and dad to say, well, why don't you consider architecture? And it was so strange that we hadn't thought of it, because we thought that a career was this thing that you get a briefcase and you go into a place and you do it. It's very serious, and you come home and you complain about it. And design brought us so much joy that we never imagined that it could be a career option, because that was where we went to escape and have fun. And so it took our parents, I think, to bring that possibility to life for us. And then once we started to explore that route, we knew there was no turning back. Would you add to that, Teran?
Yeah, no, I think just to kind of pick up on that thread around storytelling and how we were kind of obsessed with that, I think even that notion sort of found different outlets. So we were, as Teman said, we were telling these stories with our toys and building this city. But, we also, I think from the 6th grade all the way through college, we also played music. Teman played French horn. I played the tenor saxophone and then the bassoon. And even music was an outlet for us, I think, engaging storytelling. We were obsessed with how to kind of communicate an emotion through sort of really abstract means. And so it was yet one more creative outlet that was there as we were growing up. And I think we were, to Teman's point exactly, it didn't resonate with us that this could be a career path. And, whereas we did end up becoming professional musicians, I think the storytelling has definitely stuck with us in our career paths.
I think that idea of storytelling play, which is obviously what you were doing, building the city, you've almost kind of got the traces of that city, both of you in your, backgrounds on your shelves and stuff. But just so thinking about that, you went to our architectural school. Great question here from Eno. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. I'm just looking at my phone. With this architectural background, do you ever miss the scale of spatial design architecture after you've pivoted into maybe more brand side or agency side or things like that? Do you miss that kind of idea of building that space from your bedroom out or on larger projects as well?
I found that it ends up coming back. So I think it's always there, but I found that every single one of the roles I've been in, I've had to flex that muscle. So for instance, when I was at Panera Bread, part of my role was in helping design our cafe. So I literally was reading plans and developing renders for us to innovate on those cafe designs. When I moved to Amazon Music, we were opening a global network of creator studios. And so I was working hand in hand with the architects to move that work along. And even in my current role at BECU, one of the verticals that sit within my org is our environmental branding team. So they're responsible for designing all of our credit union branches that you see. So I'm still going through and I'm looking at shop drawings, and we're working through materials on top of dealing with brand strategy and affinity partnerships and all the other creative pieces as well. So I found that even if I've missed it, it ends up finding me in my career anyway.
I'd agree with that. First, hi, Eno. Eno's one of our students, so it's great to see our community there. I would agree. I think it never went away. I remember there was a question someone asked me at a conference years and years ago. They're like, "Do you ever feel sad that you had to leave the profession?" And I was like, "That is such an odd question." I was like, "We never left. It's that our practice is simply it involves different dynamics." But to Teran's point, those spatial dynamics are there all the time. Even in our time at PepsiCo, one of the first projects we worked on together, Pepsi was going after the business at Disney Paris. And so we had to create a pitch for that. Tron and I built an entire concept around Alice in Wonderland, where we turned that sort of pitch room for 5 hours into this, literally transported these folks into a forest setting in Alice in Wonderland. And so we had to lean into that from the sort of sonic point of view, but also the visual point of view. So furniture and servings and all of it, a highly sort of spatialized environment. And then we did the same thing when we helped Pepsi pitch and eventually win the business for the World Expo in Dubai. And then from there, I went on to my design leadership role at General Mills. And beyond just working in the world of your brands and packaging, there are also spatial representations of that too. Everything from listening lounges for certain brands to the way they're going to show up in activations. So it just means that the spatial component hasn't gone away. It's just woven into a complexity of other elements of brand and language that you also have to be very facile with.
Yeah, that's a little bit like your earlier comment on the law degree. You're always going to carry that with you, that spatial skill set, whether it's on a shelf and what's the space around that, or whether it's an experience in a larger area. Great question from Amber. She has a sister, I think you said sister, who's age 14. And whether obviously probably no one on the call is age 14, but we may have I have an 18-year-old son. We may have a nephew, a niece. Everybody on the call might know someone who's thinking right now as a teenager of going into design in some capacity. And it's tough being a teenager, right? So it's like we're all forced to make choices they are forced to make choices very early. If they wanted to get into design, but just words like storytelling and spatial design, that's just too far for them at the moment. Any advice for our families or friends or neighbors who might be at that sort of younger end, which is tipping us again into the educational side, to what areas would you sort of encourage them to at least consider at this point in their young age?
Teran, you go ahead and tackle that one first. I'll tag on.
No, I think it's really important to start with your passions. And so, as you're saying, the words like storytelling are abstract, but if you're someone, for instance, who loves to draw, if you're someone who loves to play video games, if you're someone who loves to sing, if you're someone who loves to use your hands to make things, those are all kind of creative ways in. And those are sort of, those can ladder up and become things sort of a professional. Those can become your bread and butter, the things that sort of move you into the profession in one way or another. And you just have to find out the way that you're going to do it. So I would say be very clear about what your passions are and what your passions aren't. And if you even have a question of what those passions are, I've also found that it's easier to determine what are things you don't like as opposed to the things that you do. And so once you realize the stuff that you don't like, it's like, well, just don't do that. And then with the things that are left, you start to explore. So it might be, I mean, there's so many outlets now, even with TikTok that I didn't have growing up, where you can start to connect with other professions. Talking to people who are in your community who may be artists or creatives. If you have the opportunity to go in and to intern, to do that, to visit, if there's a university or local creative institution in your area, to do that, to read publications, to start to learn about the industry that you're in. All of those things are going to empower you to make a decision about where you want to go. And then once you've made that decision, stay flexible. You don't need to commit and be this sort of intractable person that, like, you may like one thing at one moment and then at another you may discover a new passion. Give yourself the permission to start to explore even as you age, so that you're always staying engaged and passionate about the work that you're doing.
I think that's a fantastic point. All I'll add to that is I think no matter your way in, and there's no need to be specific, I would encourage everyone at these young ages to just focus on play and on building a world for yourself. And that can come in so many ways. It might be, in our case, part of it was the work we were doing together, but off on my own, I was writing stories. And that led me to wanting to make maps of what those places looked like. And so I was building this little world to escape into. In many ways, that is an early design practice. You're creating from nothing this other kind of thing. It might be you going on one set and knitting and weaving, understanding the dimensions of warp and weft. That is going to translate into an architectural practice. It is a language you can evolve over time. It might be watercolors, and then suddenly you're understanding layers and palimpsests, and you can, no matter what, you develop a language and a world through play that you can start to formalize later. But that would be my encouragement, because then it doesn't specifically become a thing that you're putting pressure on. It's just this thing that you're passionate about and that you love, and it's a world that did not exist. So build that world for yourself. It will not look like the world that anyone else makes, knowing that there's a point where you develop a language there that you can formalize in a design education later.
There's so many great quotes that we're going to pull out of this. I can imagine one day you guys write a book and we open it this way, and somehow we meet in the middle from both of your stories. Here's a question. Let's go to the brand side. In your experience, guys, when design, maybe that's based on a product, we talked about Popsicle and maybe some other brands, that loses its influence, is it usually because of, what would you think, leadership, structure, timing, design, new products entering the market? What do you think are some of the factors that forces a brand to lose its shine?
Yes, and feel free to chime in here. I think the mistake that brands often make, and we definitely see it in the headlines that are coming across everyone's radar screens right now, is they say, well, I have an awareness issue. And you'll have brands that are multi-billion-dollar brands. I'm like, everyone knows that brand. If you walked up to someone on the street and mentioned that brand, they know what you were talking about. So it's not an issue of awareness. It might be an issue of conversion. But it's not that people don't know who you are or that you exist. And so many brands spend time saying, oh, because it's an awareness issue, we just need to show up with shiny new packaging or shiny new logo. And I'm like, we are not solving the inherent problem here. So part of it, I think, is why I said, yes, it is diagnosing what that problem is, because it may be several things. It sometimes can stem from a leadership issue where someone might be new to desk and they just want to make a big splashy entrance. And so they, go on some strange journeys. It could be an issue internally. It could be that there's a disruptor. It could be that the category changed. It could be that there's a major pandemic that happens and suddenly everyone's sensibilities shift and you're caught back on your heels. It could be that consumer has evolved, or that you've plateaued with that consumer and have to go after another. You want to spend time diagnosing what that is. For me, that's really important. I think even in my role at General Mills, one of the things I did early on was I created a new briefing structure for us. because I got tired of reading briefs where they would say, oh, we need to make our products more shoppable, or we need to, find ways to pop it shelf. I'm like, even a train wreck will get your attention. You won't put it in your cart, but you'll stop and you'll look. And I was like, and it honestly sets your agency partners up for this disadvantage because they have to interpret these strange poems of what you should be doing. And so then let's get specific on the business problem that we're asking design to solve, because design cannot solve all of those issues. And so when it comes to brand, you want to get very specific on the problem that you are actually going after. It could be several things, multiple things laid on top of them. And then once you've diagnosed that problem, you then have to ask yourself, is design the right answer here? Because it may not be. And I think as a designer, folks sometimes perplexed when I say that. I'm like, I don't want to come in with my superhero cape and say design can solve all things. There's some things that it can't. And so once we're clear on that, we can start to put a plan in place. And that plan has taken so many different routes in the work that we've done throughout the years. But I think if you aren't clear on that problem in the upfront, then you're probably going to be throwing things at a wall and just praying something sticks on the back end. Tron, what would you add to that?
I would add to that. I have very strong opinions on this. I'm going to try to keep myself out of trouble, but I think the issue that a lot of brands face is around that consumer or that customer and who they are and what they want. And I found that there are many brands who have a sort of identity crisis when it comes to who their customer is. They start designing not for who their customer is, but for who they want their customer to be. And so you get these companies that you'll look at their advertising. It's got all of these angsty Gen Z models in it, looking in cool poses and whatnot. And when you actually look at their customer isn't that person. And so they're spending millions of dollars putting creative out in the universe that isn't even resonating with the customer because, the person they're talking to isn't under their tent. And so I think that's a huge issue that a lot of brands have to be honest with themselves about, is who our customer actually is. And it may not be the very cool person that you want to put in your ads, and that's okay. But if you aren't speaking to that customer directly, you'll never convince them to put your product in the cart and take it home. I think the other issue around the customer is that who that customer is today is not who that customer is going to be tomorrow. People are human beings. We're organic. We change. What I like today, you talk to me a week from now, and that may have shifted. And so, we have companies that do a lot of work in sort of identifying and developing a profile around who their target consumer is. And that person's going to change. And if you don't keep up with them, they will leave you behind. And so many brands feel like once they solve that problem once, they don't have to ask that question again. You have to be asking who your customer is every single day. You have to be engaging them. You have to be, really leaning into the empathy part of design thinking and understanding what are their passion points, what are the things that keep them up at night, what are the things that they need from you. And you have to constantly keep that front and center as you're developing and bringing products to the market for them, because if you don't, they'll find somebody else who will.
Just by the way, guys, I've never seen so many 100% emojis go up the screen. So huge value and just, questions to ask our clients and our brands that we're working with. Are we really speaking to her, or do we want to speak to her, but really our customer base is over here? Let's get to the elephant in the room and talk about AI. And I'm not just maybe talking about, but here's a question from Erica. With companies looking and using AI constantly all day, even on the agency side, freelance side, the brand side, do you think it will change the consumer experience with the brand? And can AI give the consumer the experience that the human created packaging has always given? So we probably know we're not there yet, but do you think that that's in everybody's kind of roadmap, that AI will be able to create that, or we still need that kind of human touch to create that emotional connection, to tell that story, to speak to the right audience? What's your perspective, as a whole on the AI kind of movement in everybody's world?
Mhm.
I can start with this one.
Go right ahead, Teran.
And this is something that comes up in my day to day, even talking with my team. And one of the things I emphasize, because we see these storylines and these headlines around AI is coming, it's going to take all of our design jobs, and we're all going to be replaced. And one thing I remind folks of, and even the senior leaders within my organization, is that we will always need a human touch. AI can do many things and has many things, but it does not have taste. So it cannot tell you sort of what looks good and what looks bad and what is appropriate and what isn't. It can spit up a number of options for you, but that's a pure human taste. So to be able to determine what is appropriate, what is elevated and what isn't, it does not know. And you will always have to rely on a human being to do that. Now, where AI becomes effective is it allows us to move more quickly. If you need to generate a number of options to consider, if you need something to kickstart a brainstorming session, it's a great tool for that. And so I think it will become more and more powerful tool for designers. But in my opinion, it will never, ever, ever replace human beings.
I agree with that. I think there is this myth or this fantasy that there's just going to be this room where it's sort of you can, throw in a brief and then design walks out the door. And it's completely automated. And that can't happen, partly because if we all think about the work we've been involved in, so much of what we see that lives in the world is part, of course, this idea of sort of rigor and research, but there's also just some dumb luck and serendipity involved too. And that we cannot approximate through automation. And this is where I put the onus back on our design community, I think. And this is where I'll say something controversial that I think is going to get us into a little bit of trouble, but I think it's so important. When design shows up in these spaces of commerce, we have to understand that we need to come in and speak the language of these spaces. Part of, I think, my partner is a linguist, so we have lots of conversations about the nuance of language and communication. But we come in as designers, and it partly goes back to our education, where we don't talk about the M word, money. We don't talk about budgets. We are just we design for ourselves, and we pin these things on a wall, and others review them. But we come into these sort of spaces of commerce, and we aren't armed with the language to be effective and communicative, which means that our work is not living and thriving at the upper levels of leadership where decisions are happening. Because of that, when it starts to be time to make decisions around efficiencies and cost cutting, design is often on the chopping block first. And so I think we have to understand that we have to come and integrate what we do into a larger conversation around commerce. I'm not saying you need to come in and be, an MBA expert, but you need to know enough to be dangerous in the room so that you're tying your work and your results to that. Because if not, it makes it easy for organizations to pigeonhole the output, because to a certain degree, design is commoditized. The sort of adults go in the room and they think about it, and when it's time to look like something, we go and tap the designer. No, we should be in that room from the outset, and they have to understand the importance of having that design point of view. But that's something that we have to constantly communicate. So for me, I think I never see a world where design is just going to be automated. I think there are too many dynamics involved for that. I think AI is going to be a tool that allows us to move faster, perhaps be more efficient, but we have to celebrate and underscore the need for that human agency. It is what gives design its magic. It's what gives design its impact and its impetus. And if we aren't championing that in every room that we can, then we leave that narrative for others to sort of create for us, and that gets design into trouble very quickly.
And I'll say definitively, many organizations have attempted to automate design. I would say all have or either will fail. It is not something that you can automate, and you do so at your peril.
I think also what I'm taking away from these last comments, from both of your comments, is if designers obviously were embracing AI in some capacity, not for the finished product, not for the craft, not for the things where we need, but it can be efficient, it can speed things up. That could actually give us time back on a simple level to learn either a new language around commerce, around kind of like, speaking to that kind of senior group of people. So design moves up the conversation, moves up the ladder, and allows designers then to not only do great work, but actually have a conversation at a very, very senior level. Do you think, therefore, going back to education, that the education, not necessarily Harvard, just broadly speaking, creative schools around the world should be infusing that design, but AI into their programs, but in a way that doesn't take away the creativity of the individual, but actually gives them just another tool? And I'm sure many schools are doing this anyway. But how do you think that that's the future of a creative course? It's a fusion of AI and human creativity, and how that might manifest in the next 5 or 10 years.
I love that question. It's funny, Simone, you and I were actually contending with this in our we just finished our latest semester at Harvard, and for the first time, as we were beginning in the semester, one of the questions that was asked to us, we had to articulate our course's policy around AI. And we were like, this is a first, I guess it's here.
New day.
You're having to establish whether, you're going to allow your students to use the tool if you weren't. And so for us, we're very adamant with our students about, yes, you should be using AI as a tool throughout the semester. This isn't something where it's like we're going to ban it or say you can't. It is, I think it's a tool that certain students need to become very facile with. It's certainly the thing I would say, at the end of the day, AI will not take your job, but someone who knows AI will. And so you have to understand these tools and how to use them in order to remain competitive just in the marketplace. And so for us, it was a no-brainer that we had to, we'll be like, yes, for our policy, we want our students using and engaging this tool.
Yeah. I agree. I think that and it's a slippery slope also, because I think it makes sense in design spaces. I think where you want to be careful is when it comes to all of those papers that you have to write that make designers groan. But there's such an important exercise in that, because it becomes a part of your ability to stand in a room and tell great stories. I can't tell you how many projects would have died on the vine if I had not stood up in a room and used my voice to advocate for them by constructing an argument that was believable and that had impact and gravitas. That's what all that writing is preparing you to do. So that stuff, I would say, don't ferry off to AI, because you're robbing yourself of the chance to be a power maker in a room much later, and your work may honestly hang in the balance. So in terms of speed up and efficiency and that design sort of iterative process, of course. But when it comes to developing those tools of developing and creating beautiful arguments and powerful, impactful arguments that the world of writing papers and having to construct arguments give you, don't outsource that to AI. It may help you in the short term, but you're going to find yourself a bit hamstrung in the long run when you're in a room and you're having to sing for your supper and convince someone of something that they are not necessarily convinced of in that moment.
Yeah, I think everybody would agree with and are agreeing with your comments that, it's so new, it's so fresh, it's just come out of the oven, so to speak. And ChatGPT at school from my teenager, which it's cheating, right? It's banned. But it's not about the fact that it's cheating. It's how to use it in a way that sets everybody up for success, versus it being, this kind of thing that, they shouldn't be doing. But I guess that will just unfold over the next few years, and people will find their own way to infuse AI, but not taking away from the human creativity.
And AI will change. It's not this static thing either. Like it's not this thing you can put on the shelf AI on the corner. It is evolving with every headline every week. So as it evolves, our relationship to it will evolve as well.
Hopefully it gets, for freelancers. I'm not sure how accurate these numbers are, but I wondered what the cost of being a freelancer was. How many subscriptions are required? I don't just mean, kind of the Adobe side, but now we have AI and we're signing up for credits or tokens here or this or that. Some are aggregating. So it's actually, and then everything else that any freelancer, trying to operate in their own world from hardware to software, it's probably $3,000, $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 US dollars a year. And that's real money. So it's like, I'm hoping that some of this will become affordable to allow creatives to access some of these tools, in a way that makes it a useful tool for them versus I need to sign up for something new because the new products every week, so it is a moving target. I want to go back to the brand side. We've got a few minutes left. From both of your perspectives, tell us one of the most, you talked about advocating for a project a second ago. Anything that stands out in your careers that just like a favorite, a wonderful experience, both in terms of the creative side, but also maybe pushing on something that maybe nobody else saw? Anything that pops out from the brand work that you guys have done?
Did you want to jump first?
You had talked about the Disney Paris work that we had done, like since it's a project that we collaborated on at Pepsi. Maybe that one might be worth unpacking a bit because that was an interesting project. I had been working at Pepsi for about 3 or 4 months, and then Teman came in shortly thereafter, and we were on different teams, but they asked us to work together on this project. And basically, the premise was that essentially the contract that Disney had with their beverage provider, which was typically was Coca-Cola, was coming up for renewal, and we at Pepsi wanted to bid on the business. And so we had to come in and essentially make a case to these Disney executives for why they should consider Pepsi as their beverage provider and move away from Coca-Cola. And the brief that was brought to us was just, well, we're going to be in Paris and we need you to put together a space where we can talk about all the innovations that we would bring to Disney with our product portfolio and with all the wonderful things that Pepsi does. And as Teman and I sat with that brief, we're like, there's a missed opportunity here. And if we're in the space of Disney, we can't be showing spreadsheets about, products and specs and all of that. We need to start to engage our creative imaginations. We need to almost sort of become kids and children again and engage fantasy.
And Imagineers.
Yeah. And so we took that brief and really just, I think, turned it on its head. And so maybe talk a little bit about some of the things that we did just in an effort to kind of, I think, really bring some fantasy and storytelling to that brief.
I think for us, we said we need to speak to Disney in the language that it speaks so well to others. And so we said, let's show up like Imagineers. We're going to immerse them in an environment where we can do some storytelling. And of course, there was a spring where we would start to tell this story through images, but we didn't just do renders. We brought in folks who had backgrounds in that sort of Imagineering aesthetic. And that's what we used to create the images. But we actually built out these worlds. We used an Alice in Wonderland theme. So there was basically oversized grass, leaves, and huge flying birds. And you would literally, we wanted folks to be able to sort of step into the space of fantasy. And so they would go into this conference room and there was literally this sort of kaleidoscopic portal they went through with reflective glass shards. And when they escaped on the other side of that, they were suddenly in this other world. It was a conference room that we had 24 hours to turn around, but we did it. And so the first part of that was bringing them into this kind of beverage experience where there was like Quaker carts and all kinds of things for them to sample as a way to talk about the way that we could show up with products, but rooted in this world of fantasy with oversized white tables, and everything was sort of cranked up in scale to this absurd degree. And then from there, they passed into the room where the stage would be presented. And suddenly we had all of these mismatched chairs sort of taking cues from the Alice in Wonderland dinner setting that was there. And we built worlds around each of the brands, little micro worlds. So one around Tropicana. There was one around the world of the Spire machines. There was one around Lay's. And we used that to tell powerful storytelling through sampling. They were tasting food, but also the sound. We realized there was a sonic layer and if we wanted folks to feel like I escaped and I'm not even in my conference room or office, I'm in this other place. And I remember seeing video, and I wanted to see the reaction of the people as they walked into these Disney folks, they walked into the room, and now they're in the business of imagination. And when you see their faces light up like children, when you see that gasp, you're like, I've got them. And I knew that from that moment, we had them in this space where we could tell powerful stories, and we came this close.
We almost took that business.
Down to that, because they were
I think Coca-Cola ended up having to lower their price in order but we came very, very close to taking that business. So, I think the lesson in that was, I think from a design standpoint, always challenge the brief. It's like the brief is going to come in, but there's always an opportunity there. And so, that's something that I say to all of my teams. It's like, yes, you've been given your brief, but challenge the brief. Use your subject matter expertise to bring in a layer and a consideration that your stakeholder may not have considered. And never lose the power of storytelling and imagination and creativity, because it's the thing that takes something from good to great and memorable.
And challenge all the dimensions. I was excited to see John Tate on the call. He works with Maine Music Studio, and I have worked with them to create some of the most fantastic sonic sonic logos for our brands. Make sure, hi, John, that you are working in every dimension. What I love about sound is that it's inherently tied to memory and it's sticky. So anything you use it on tends to perform that much better than media that just stands by itself. So take and build immersive brand worlds that lean on all of the senses. So not just what you see. What do you smell? What do you taste? What can you touch? Because it scratches a part of a sort of primordial part of our brain that takes us back to this world of sort of nostalgia and childhood. And the more you lean on that, I think you set yourself up to win in the longer run. So realize that as a designer, it is as much about what you see as all these other dimensions, and develop a facility with all of those attributes.
It's kind of amazing that whole Disney story and the sound and the smell and the senses, engaging those senses takes me back in your storytelling, back to your bedroom when you built that city and you're probably playing on an instrument. And, this idea that what we did as kids then manifests into a strategic pitch to a potential client. I would have been at Coke then. I would have loved to have seen that deck. But I think on that day, we were at KFC and Pizza Hut pitching for their business, but what goes around comes around. But everybody's friends in this kind of bigger world now. So as we get to the end of this, and I want to say huge thank you to you guys. And you mentioned that you have a written article or publication coming out through the Harvard Gazette, I think. I'd love for you to just, plug that for a second. I can't wait to read it. And I'd love to, for you to share that with people listening in today as well.
Absolutely. Tron, go ahead.
It was a great piece. As months ago, we first started teaching our seminar 14 years ago. The Harvard Gazette reached out and did a written story on us. And what we're really excited about with this piece that's forthcoming is that it's media, it's video content, where they shadowed us and our students for the semester. And so you'll get to see them developing their products, them sitting down in ideation sessions and talking about what they're going to do, and it will follow them all the way through to the final review, where they were presenting to a group of jurors, James and you and your colleagues, and so it really, I think, paints for me the most complete picture of what it is we ask students to do in a semester. So we've gotten a preview of what that content is going to look like, and we're really excited about when that actually gets published.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be, for folks who wonder what happens on the behind the curtain, it will be an interesting sort of way to peer, back there and see exactly what we've been up to. And Teran and I have honestly been very cagey about how much we've shared of this work of the students in the past, because it's never been about promoting what we do. We teach them also how to protect their intellectual property. So you don't see it published very many places because of that. So this is a sort of one of those rare moments to sort of see what's been going on and what we've been, honestly, slowly evolving over the past 14 years. And every year we're excited by the output, but we like to imagine as a catalyst. We're as excited about what the students do in this next phase once the course is over, when they go out and they disrupt industries and go on to build exciting things that didn't exist in the world before.
Final question for you guys, because your careers have converged, diverged. You're still together working on the educational side, but you're as separate brands. Do you think, like the pet story, do you think there's a moment in your future where you might actually professionally kind of, come back together again in that sense? Or do you kind of like where you both are separately, but bouncing off each other constantly?
I think one of the things we've learned is to never say never. It's like similar to design always finding us. Tamanda somehow always end up finding each other. So like the opportunity will somehow unfold where we end up back under the same roof inevitably. So I'd say if that happens, we're both open to it. We've always been co-conspirators. I think even in our lives now, where we're in different organizations, we pick each other's brains about, it's like having a built-in consultant who understands all of your challenges and also allows you to vent when you're frustrated. So there'll always be some sort of, I think, means by which we collaborate. But if we can do that more explicitly, I think we certainly, tell me if you disagree, we'd be open to it.
I absolutely agree. I think we started our worlds together as entrepreneurs. We actually started by working on our thesis project at Harvard together. And it was because our mentor, Toshiko Mori, told us to do it. But we treated it as a sort of litmus test for if we could actually work together and not kill each other. And it worked out well. So from there, we went on to become entrepreneurs. And it's always been a part of the DNA of how we think. And so I think even if we weren't working on an explicit entrepreneurial effort, it's in the DNA of how we approach all of our work from day to day. So like Tarana said, I would never say never because we are like these two planets whose orbit is always pulling them closer and closer to each other.
Well, guys, this has been fantastic conversation. Thank you, both of you. In a way, it's like we look at we talked about AI. There's an AI agent that understands me, and I can talk to that AI agent. But you guys have got that built in to your relationship forever. So that idea, that humanity, that you can bounce that between you, both of you, both ways. Thanks again. This has been a real pleasure. Such a hit. And to everybody on the call, I'm sure you can find these guys out there if you're not already connected. Sounds like many friends are on the call as well. But let's all stay connected. Thanks to everybody for joining us. I know it's a precious hour in everybody's day, and we really do appreciate it from everybody at KnownUnknown, and we look forward to our next conversation. And hopefully these guys are going to be a difficult one to beat, but we've got something special hopefully every month. But thanks, guys. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Such a pleasure. Thanks, everyone.
But then yesterday I went to the gym and I broke my pinky.
Oh my God. Listen, I was running errands, what was it, last Saturday, and I slipped on a block of frozen ice and I broke my 8th rib. So I think we're both...
Really? Okay, we need to unpack this on the call in front of 100 plus people. Hey, Teran.
Good morning. Good morning.
How are you?
Good.
James was like he broke his pinky at the gym yesterday. I was telling him about my rib.
Yeah, like high five, not.
Oh no.
Teran is unscathed, so I think he,
for now, knock on wood, I feel like.
Yeah. Listen, if that's all I get this year, I'm okay with it.